I tiffed by throwing my steak out a window. The night began with the kind of nervous energy you can feel in the car before anyone even speaks. My wife must have reminded me 7 or 8 times on the drive over that this dinner meant everything for her new job. She kept fidgeting with her bracelet, stealing anxious glances at me as though I were a wild card she wasn't entirely sure she should bring. I tried to ease the tension with jokes, brushing her worries aside, telling her that I always make a great impression. Confidence has always been my greatest flaw and my most loyal companion. Her boss lived on the 3rd floor of a pristine apartment building, the kind where the hallways smell like fresh laundry and the air feels unnaturally still. She greeted us at the door with the warm enthusiasm of someone who rarely entertains but desperately wants the night to go well. She was in her early 50s, sharp, composed, and clearly trying to show her new employee and husband that she was more than just a name on an office door. The living room felt like a spread in the lifestyle magazine, all soft lighting and tasteful furniture. We sat around a gleaming dining table, sipping drinks and easing into small talk. To my relief, the conversation flowed effortlessly, and her laughter came often and easily. Each time she chuckled at one of my jokes, my wife flashed me an approving smile that said, "See, this is what I needed from you." For a while, everything felt perfect, the kind of perfect that makes you believe you've already secured a victory before the real challenge even begins. Then she brought out the steaks. Thick, glossy, beautifully plated, they looked like something you'd see on a billboard. I dug my knife into mine, expecting a warm, medium interior. Instead, the blade slid through something that felt disturbingly alive. The inside was a trembling, cold mass of raw flesh so red it almost glowed. The steak didn't look undercooked, it looked untouched by heat entirely. I swallowed hard and tried not to let my face betray me. I've eaten rare steak before, I'm not squeamish. But this wasn't rare. This was prehistoric. This was the moment right before a veterinarian says, "We can still save it." I tried to push the meat around my plate quietly, hoping no one noticed how intensely I was avoiding putting it anywhere near my mouth. My wife's boss was happily sawing away at her medium rare cut, oblivious to the existential crisis unfolding across the table. My wife was also enjoying hers without issue, blissfully unaware that I was mentally spiraling. I considered my options, which were bleak. I couldn't claim veganism, not after I'd praised the steaks with cartoon-level enthusiasm just minutes earlier. I couldn't pretend to be full, my plate was untouched. I couldn't ask her to cook it longer, my pride had already backed me into a corner, and I certainly couldn't force myself to swallow something that still seemed to be contemplating a future. My brain raced, my palms sweated. I could practically hear my wife's warning echoing in the background. "Please don't embarrass me tonight." Then salvation came in the form of a simple sentence. "I'll be right back, just need to check on dessert," her boss said cheerfully, pushing her chair back and stepping into the kitchen. The moment the doorframe swallowed her silhouette, I felt something shift inside me. A wild idea sparked, a ridiculous, impulsive, catastrophic solution that should have died immediately. Instead, it grew, lighting up my mind like a cartoon bulb flickering to life. I stared across the table at the tall, sparkling window. And in that moment, the universe whispered the dumbest possible idea directly into my skull. Throw it out. Once the idea rooted itself in my mind, logic didn't just fade, it evaporated. I glanced at my wife, who was blissfully unaware as she took another bite of her perfectly cooked steak. My pulse hammered in my ears. I could practically hear the seconds ticking down until her boss returned from the kitchen and discovered that I had not eaten a single bite. I had to choose between swallowing a near-raw slab of meat or taking decisive, wildly irrational action. My eyes locked on the window across the room. It was tall, spotless, and framed by gossamer curtains that swayed gently from the breeze of the ceiling fan. In the dim candlelight, it looked open, wide open. a perfect escape route, a portal through which my problem could vanish into the night, never to be seen again. I knew it was insane, I knew it was reckless, but desperation does strange things to the human mind. In that instant, all I could think was, get the steak out of sight before the hostess returns. I wiped my hands on my napkin, reached down and wrapped my fingers around the cold slab of meat. The texture alone almost made me recoil, soft and disturbingly pliant, like a water balloon filled with something that should not be in a water balloon. My wife was still focused on her plate. Good, that bought me 2 more seconds. I leaned back, aimed carefully at the beautiful, inviting window, and summoned the confidence of a man who had already made far too many bad decisions to turn back now. I gave the steak a small shake to flick off any excess juice, then let my arm arc forward. I threw it. I actually threw it. For one weightless moment, it sailed in a graceful trajectory, a perfect buttery lobbed dinner frisbee. In my mind, it was already tumbling through the night air, disappearing into the darkness, problem solved. Reality, however, had other plans. The sound came first, a horrifying, meaty thwap that echoed across the dining room like someone body slamming a jellyfish onto a window pane. My brain short-circuited, my eyes widened. The steak did not fly outside. The steak did not go anywhere. The steak hit the window and stuck. The window wasn't open. It was just unbelievably, criminally, spiritually clean. The kind of clean you only achieve if you polish your glass every day with holy water and microfiber cloths blessed by monks. My jaw dropped. My wife froze mid-chew. Her eyes slowly lifted from her plate to the window, where the steak clung for a second like a defiant barnacle, then began its slow, humiliating slide downward, leaving behind a long, bloody streak. Every molecule of air in the room seemed to disappear. My wife's expression shifted from confusion to horror to that very specific look only a spouse can give you. A look that says, "You absolute moron, you are destroying my life in real time." Before I could form a single word of explanation, we heard footsteps returning from the kitchen. Her boss rounded the corner. She stopped dead. Her gaze moved from the streaked window to the steak sitting on the sill like a wounded animal, to my perfectly empty plate, to my guilt-ridden face. She looked at me the way a museum curator would look if she caught someone smearing finger paint across a Rembrandt. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. 3 seconds passed. 4, 5. Then, finally, with the confidence of a man who has never once thought before acting, I blurted, I'm so sorry. I'm such a klutz." The words hung there like smoke. The room fell into a silence so heavy, it felt like gravity had doubled. I could practically hear my dignity dissolving somewhere beneath the dining table. My wife's boss stared at me with an expression that mixed disbelief, mild horror, and the unmistakable look of someone mentally reevaluating every decision that had led her to invite us here tonight. My mouth kept moving even though my brain clearly wasn't involved. It slipped, sort of in that direction. You know how it is, sometimes knives, accidents. If I had stopped talking at any point, I might have preserved a shred of dignity. Instead, I doubled down, because panic has a way of convincing you that maybe, just maybe, if you keep babbling, reality will bend in your favor. My wife said nothing. Her silence was louder than any words she could have spoken. Her eyes didn't leave me. They didn't need to. They communicated everything. I told you to behave. I told you this night mattered. And you glorious idiot, threw a steak at a window.
The boss finally blinked, as if waking from a trance. Her voice was calm, but carried the tremor of someone watching a perfectly planned evening collapse. You threw it?" she asked, as though she had hallucinated the entire spectacle. No, I said too quickly. It fell, sort of, in that direction." My wife slowly put her fork down, leaned back, and clasped her hands in her lap. The universal sign of a woman ready to watch the man she loves destroy himself without intervening. She had entered observer mode, scientist mode, let's see how deep this hole goes mode. Trying to salvage even a sliver of sanity, I grabbed my napkin and rushed to the window, dabbing at the bloody streaks with the urgency of someone trying to erase a crime scene. But napkins are not designed for this. All I managed to do was smear it into a larger, more dramatic abstract painting, a Pollock piece titled "The Consequences of Hubris." Behind me, the silence grew so dense it felt like fog. I picked up the steak from the windowsill, set it gently on my napkin like it was a fragile baby bird, and muttered a string of apologies that didn't make sense even in my own head. So sorry, unbelievable. Must have been the angle? Very slippery meat. I'll clean everything. I'm a disaster. My wife can confirm. I turned toward her, hoping for backup. She blinked once, nothing. The boss cleared her throat softly, the way you do when trying to reset a scene that cannot be reset. "Well," she finally said, "these things happen?" Her question mark was doing a lot of heavy lifting. I nodded vigorously. "Yes, exactly. Happens all the time. To people who have coordination issues." The boss slowly sat back down, but her eyes kept drifting toward the window, as though expecting the steak to suddenly reanimate and finish the job by flinging itself out on its own. Desperate to normalize the situation, I forced myself back to my seat and stared down at my now floor-contaminated, window-kissed, gravity-abused steak. It looked worse up close. Cold, damp, a little dusty from the sill. It glistened in a way no food should. My wife was watching me like a hawk. I could see the message written across her face in bright, pulsing neon letters. "Eat it!" And in that moment, I understood. To restore even an ounce of credibility, to salvage my wife's dignity, to keep her boss from questioning her entire hiring decision, there was only one path forward. So, I swallowed my pride, picked up my fork, cut into that sad, battered slice of meat, and took the first bite. It was cold and chewy. It tasted like shame. And yet, as I forced myself to chew, I realized the humiliation wasn't over, not even close. The first bite was bad, but the second was worse. By the third, I swear the steak was fighting back. Every chew felt like chewing a damp leather glove you find behind a gas station. The table remained painfully quiet while I struggled, each bite a small punishment for my own idiocy. My wife lifted her glass and took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact, as if silently conducting my suffering like a maestro. Her boss tried to resume harmless dinner conversation, but the energy never recovered. Every few minutes, her gaze flickered toward the window, then toward my plate, like she still wasn't convinced she wasn't witnessing some kind of performance art. I kept my head down and focused on swallowing humiliation disguised as beef.
Halfway through the ordeal, my wife let out a small sigh. One of those restrained, exhausted, I married a circus act sighs. It was almost quiet enough to miss, but it hit me harder than the window it hit my steak. I could practically see her mentally rewriting her professional bio. Married, one child, husband is that child. By the time I finished the last bite, my body felt like it needed either applause or medical attention. I placed my fork down gently, the same way you'd lay down a weapon at the end of a hostage negotiation. Dessert arrived, but at that point, the emotional atmosphere was so weighted that even the cheesecake looked like it felt sorry for me. My wife's boss tried to salvage the night with a cheerful tone that only made the awkwardness more pronounced. My responses were short, quiet, and extremely safe. Yes, delicious dessert, lovely evening, thank you for having us. No, I will not throw anything else tonight. When it was finally time to leave, I helped gather plates, desperate to offer some form of redemption. As I carried the final dish to the sink, I caught sight of the window again. The glass was spotless once more, thanks to my frantic smearing. You'd never know a man had attempted a culinary escape mission there. A small mercy. The elevator ride down was silent. My wife didn't say a word as we crossed the parking lot. She didn't speak during the drive home either. It wasn't anger, worse. It was a quiet processing, the kind of silence someone uses to reevaluate their life choices. When we finally pulled into the driveway, she walked inside without looking back. I followed, ready for whatever explosion was waiting. But the explosion never came. Instead, after 2 hours of icy quiet, I got a text from her. She was in the bedroom. It read, "Good news. Boss and I just had a good laugh about how much of an idiot you are. You will never live this down. Love you, you moron." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was close. And honestly, I'd take that over raw steak any day.